My name is David Hurley.
My name is Shakir Chambers.
My name is Michael Hay.
I formerly worked for Harper's Prime Minister's office and for the Ontario government on Doug Ford's election campaign.
I ran 2 national campaigns for the Liberal Party under the leadership of Paul Martin.
In 2017, I was Jagmeet Singh's leadership campaign director.
I'll draw on my experiences to help you understand the strategies and tactics that will help win over voters during the campaign.
I have a very strong understanding of what the public environments are that will drive this election campaign.
I know the leader, I know the party, and I know what's at stake in this election.
This election will be divisive.
And the last one for at least 2 of the major party leaders.
This election will be historic.
And welcome to the War Room. It's our new political panel. David Hurley, Shakir Chambers, and Michael Hay are going to join me every Sunday evening from now until election night to talk party strategies and what's happening inside the war rooms. Good to see you all. We're all very excited. You agreed to do this. Yay. I want to start with how you feel your party's readiness is right now. It's coming. We'll talk about the timing of the writ dropping, but just in terms of where the parties are at, why don't you start, David? How ready do you think the Liberals are?
Well, I think that they're actually quite ready, as they should be, as all parties should be. This is a fixed election date, so it's not catching anybody by surprise. I think the Liberals are well on track to have a full slate of nominated candidates well in time. They have money, but not as much money as the Conservatives do. I think they look to me to be the most intellectually prepared of the Conservatives or the NDP.
You mean from a policy perspective?
From a policy perspective. It's clearest what they're about, and they've got the most out there. And they've got a team that worked in 2015 for them very, very well, almost all of whom are back in the jobs they had before. So I would expect them to run a great campaign.
Okay, how about you, Shakir? Where do you think the Conservatives are at?
I think the Conservatives are extremely ready. I mean, they have a full slate of candidates across the country.
Yep.
Their war room has been operating for a few months now. Ever since Andrew Scheer got elected leader, they knew who their leadership team would be.
Yep.
That's allowed them to kind of organize local campaigns. That's allowed them to focus on the message and hone in on their messaging. That's also allowed them to do a lot of fundraising. The Conservatives have out-fundraised most opposition parties, even combined in numerous quarters, so they're ready to go. I know they released a statement, I think, a week or so ago that they've knocked on 4 million doors across Canada so far. So even with that, they've had a lot of opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with a lot of voters. So I think they're gearing to go, they're prepared to go, and they're really organized.
Michael, how about the NDP?
I think the NDP is ready to go too. They were the first one, and I think the only one to release a full platform. They released it in mid-June. It's about 110 pages, and everybody can go and check it out and see where they stand. And then last week they had an exceptionally busy week, or this week that just passed for the leader. On Monday we saw the release of 2 campaign videos, one in French and one in English, very different videos targeting different audiences. We also got to see the release of their campaign slogan, In It For You. And then throughout the week, unlike Mr. Trudeau, we actually saw a series of policy announcements. Almost every single day of the week, Jagmeet was making policy announcements. He held 2 town halls, one in Montreal, one in Toronto, and tonight they're rallying in Toronto, and they actually unveiled their campaign bus, which is a beautiful bus.
So that's an interesting point, that the NDP is already out there talking about different policy measures, the federal minimum wage, guaranteed minimum wage. I think there was a student loan thing too. I wonder about the strategy behind that. If you start announcing stuff before everyone's attention is focused on the election, is there a risk that no one's going to pay attention? At a certain point,
The no one is you, really.
Yeah.
Because one of the one of the awful things about election campaigns is you can't re-announce anything. So if the media think you've already announced it, even if nobody heard it, you can't re-announce it because it's old news as far as they're concerned. So stuff that they're putting out now, they will not be able to re-announce in the election campaign. You know, I think that they did have a flurry of activity last week, probably to try to change the subject from the fact that everybody was talking about how poorly prepared the NDP were for this election.
Lack of money, lack of nominations.
Right, have very few candidates and not a lot of money. They're admitting that they're really not going to be able to run a full campaign like the other parties are for the first time in a long time. So, I mean, I think the NDP probably are coming to grips with what the campaign's about for them, but organizationally they seem well behind everybody else.
Is that part of the strategy, you think, at least to reassure people a little bit that the NDP knows what it's doing, has ideas, is ready to do this? Was that part of all of what last week was, maybe?
No, I think that there was an understanding that Labor Day was the day that everybody was coming back. Right? The Tuesday after Labor Day, people were back to school, people were tuning in and starting to focus on the federal election. And so the NDP was ready and they got into that. And they will have a full slate of candidates in time for the election, in time for the deadline. And I'm actually incredibly proud of the process that the NDP has undertaken to nominate candidates. They have the most diverse slate of candidates of any of the parties. Right now, over 50% of the candidates nominated are women. According to the CBC, only 39% of the Liberals candidates are women, and unfortunately only 31% of the Conservatives candidates are women. They also have 15 Indigenous candidates running. One of them is Chief Turtle from Grassy Narrows.
Yeah. What about the Conservatives? I don't know if there's been a lot of policy talk. There was the series of speeches that Andrew Scheer gave sort of towards the end of the spring into the summer, 5 big speeches where he laid out some important viewpoints, but less probably over the summer. Is that strategic, that he's going to try and announce things once things really get going?
Yeah, I think ultimately he's going to be rolling out policies when people are paying attention.
Sure.
I don't think the average voter is actually focused on the general election. We know we have a fixed date, but I mean, we're inside the bubble. We care about these things right now. But I think when you start getting 2 or 3 weeks from E-Day, that's when folks are tuning in. That's when folks want to know what the leader's doing, what they're saying, where the parties stand.
Yeah.
I think as you get closer to that, you'll start seeing more announcements, more policies, and they'll obviously have a full platform before E-Day.
Let's talk about the writ timing, because obviously it's the Liberals' decision, the Prime Minister's decision. Like a handful of people know when this is actually going to happen. What is the advantage right now to delaying it? It's not really a delay. He can call it when he wants it, but to not have called it sooner.
I think the Liberals feel like they, after a pretty tough spring, have got themselves into a place where they've got the momentum. Polls are showing them tied or slightly ahead with momentum behind them. Some pretty good numbers in Ontario and Quebec showing up. So on balance, I think they're saying the shorter this thing is, the better, the fewer debates there are, the better, the faster we can get this thing over with, the better.
But he's good at that stuff. Like, that's the part I don't understand. He's a good campaigner. He's shown he's a pretty good debater. Why not leave him the time to demonstrate that?
Well, I think because leading campaigns are inherently risk averse. Right? And you want to minimize the exposure, any of those things. He's very good at those things, but any one of them could go badly at any point in time. And so why take that risk?
Do your leaders, do you think that they have a preference to how long it is? I mean, no one wants to see how long it was last time. That killed almost everybody. But do you think for Andrew Scheer, he needs more time? I was out door knocking with Stella Ambler a week ago, and she's well known, but some people still didn't know who Andrew Scheer was. So I wonder if there's an advantage for him to be out there for longer.
I think at the end of the day, the Conservative campaign is ready to go at any point. They have had Andrew Scheer across the country promoting his message, setting the tone, kind of saying what his vision is for this country. They can go at any point. I think for the Liberals, I think one of the biggest things for them is that when you start to throw the writ a little bit later, they have a lot of third-party support, third-party ad support. Obviously, when you get into the campaign, that gets cut down. There's a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't do. So it's to their benefit to have a shorter writ period and a longer pre-writ period to have those
although you guys
support.
have more money to spend
That's
during
true.
and after.
Right. But I think there's a lot of third-party advocacy groups that are doing a lot of things on behalf of the Liberals that are allowing them to get away with certain things, again, before the actual writ is dropped, right? So they have a benefit of that until the writ is dropped.
What about Jagmeet Singh? I would say the same sort of thing. Probably well-known in pockets of Canada, but not necessarily everywhere. Is there an advantage to him in having a shorter or longer campaign?
I don't think it actually matters because, as we saw this week, they started a full-on campaign. Yes. They have their campaign buses, they have their planes up in the sky, like they're ready to go. I think the real question is why the delay on the Liberals' part? Why is it that this last week we only saw Trudeau, or at least I only saw Trudeau at one event? It was a $400 a person fundraiser in Brampton, and then he's not showing up for the National Leaders Debate next week. It seems more like the Liberal strategy is to have the leader lay low and go into comfortable places, and as Hurley said, just get through the election.
Well, presumably he's governing too. I mean, he has a day job, I would imagine, as well. But let's do one quick round on these debate things, because I don't know that. I remember, last campaign, it was a big issue. I am not sure that people really care who's in a debate or who's not, or who shows up and who doesn't.
Well,
I know we all talk about it, but I don't know that anybody else cares.
You can't make an issue really out of the fact that people aren't in the debate, because you're right, people don't care that much about it. And so people the parties make these decisions based on what their strategic objectives are. Last election, Mr. Harper did a lot of debates.
Yeah, it was a long campaign.
A long campaign, and he did 5 debates. Yeah. Is that because he was a super transparent guy? No, it's because he thought he would crush Trudeau in those debates, and that he would show that Trudeau was inferior to him. He thought those debates were in his favor, right? Mr. Trudeau feels like he's going to win this election if everything goes according to plan, and he doesn't need to use those debates to demonstrate any further leadership advantage. So it's not like the public's going to be upset about whether somebody participated or not.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that Mr. Trudeau isn't sure that he will crush Mr. Scheer or Jagmeet Singh in those debates.
Well, you can never be sure about what will happen in those things. It's obviously in the interest of the people that are like Jagmeet Singh. It's obviously in his interest. Go in their debate, just take a lot of roundhouse punches and see if something lands. You don't have a lot to lose. Mr. Trudeau has a lot more to lose.
Ultimately, though, when you're talking about debates, this is a prime minister that had 4 years to govern on whatever he wanted to govern on. Now in these debates, he has to defend his record. And I think there's some holes in his record that he doesn't want to go out there on the stage to defend. I think someone like Scheer, who's going out there, it's just about respect for the electorate, right? If you are a voter, you want to see leaders on stage, you want to see this battle of ideas, and you want to see who puts forth the best vision for this country. I think it's probably best to have Trudeau on the stage debating all these candidates, as eager as he was in 2015, do the same thing in 2019.
Okay, I've only got a minute left. I just want one thought about what this week will bring, like other than possibly the writ dropping, which would make me very happy. One thing that you think he'll bring? I
think this week will bring increased pressure on Jagmeet Singh to be getting more organized and getting more candidates in place. I think we're going to hear more talk about that as the week rolls on.
How about you?
I think for the NDP, we'll see the announcement of up to 100 candidates over the course of the week. They'll hit 300.
Just confirming what you want to
They'll hit 300 by the end of the week. And then we'll start to see a little bit about their campaign, like their ground campaign strategy, and likely, from my perspective, a focus on Ontario and British Columbia, which combined represent 50% of the seats.
I think this week, when the writ drops, you're going to see the Conservatives start to say to Trudeau that we can talk about what we want to do in the next 4 years, but this election, let's talk about what the record was in the previous 4 years and why you think you deserve to be reelected.
Okay, that was a good start, right? And like, we don't even have an election, and it's a good start.
I know, we've had something to talk about.
Yeah, and so we'll be back next Sunday. Thank you all.